Hey there, this is the One Boom, and today we're doing a short impromptu video reading your guys' skill gap comments you left on my video about 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry I've put this off. I'm shit at YouTube, so let's just start reading some comments, and I'll edit this together with my favorites. The skill gap is the difference between an expert player and a beginner. In Call of Duty, the skill gap is pretty small. A noob could get a lucky win over a veteran in the right circumstances. Sure, but that's pretty much the same for any game. I mean, a noob could get a lucky win in the right circumstances. That's any shooter I've ever played, but okay, I hear you. Dark Souls, on the other hand, has a massive skill gap. An expert player would completely obliterate a noob every time. Games with bigger skill gaps tend to be better at holding players for the long term, but they run the risk of scaring away new players. It's hard to get the balance right. He's right here. It's hard to get the balance right, and I totally agree with that. When a noob is constantly getting their ass kicked by longtime players, it does alienate them from playing the game. That happened to the Halo franchise, in my opinion, and that's just from complaints I heard from my friends. Not me, I'm great at Halo. Alright, so my next comment here is from Brody of Hill Country, and he says, skill gap. The gap in skill between the worst a player can be and a player that's as good as they can be. I personally believe the skill gap should be thought of as a scale, because the idea of a gap is that there's no middle ground. There is max skill and there is low skill. Skill in reality is a spectrum ranging from get good noob to you are reported hacker. In the middle are average players and the slightly above and below average. I think Battlefield 4 and Rainbow Six Siege both have higher skill gaps. Siege is a game that should take a long time to master. Map memorization, operators, weapons, and gadgets, the long-term psychological strategy, not kidding, good angles, lines of sight, single headshot kills, sounds, footsteps, call-outs, sights, when to use it, and when it gets overwhelming. In Battlefield 4, the guns take a long time to learn, take a long while to learn and use with maximum efficiency. Sniper bullet velocity and gravity take some time to learn. Player prediction is something important to learn in Battlefield 4. Effectively controlling objectives and not giving them up, etc. I like this comment because it removes the idea of a skill gap and replaces it with a skill spectrum. Very progressive of you, Brody. I think that's a good idea. The skill spectrum, because he's right, in the middle there are average players and the slightly above average and below average. That's hard. I can't even read. That's not even English. Next comment here is from Downtown Skater Boy, and some of these are kind of hard to read. No offense, guys, but you didn't make this easy on me. A skill gap should be a time for a player to get good, but there is a time where the skill gap is so large it turns off players. In a game like Rainbow Six Siege, you need to practice a lot, but you will learn the game. Okay? In Battlefield 1, the skill gap is so large that as a new player, the task would seem impossible. Really? I don't feel like the skill gap in Battlefield 1 is that large, but okay. In COD, the skill gap is way too small, and if you've played if you've played games and COD games in the past, it would look like you were hacking in 5 games or less. That's incredibly inaccurate. I'm not trying to defend COD. I get accused of that all the time, but COD is simple. But I know several people that play more COD than I do, have played COD for longer than I have, and play like every one of them, and they're terrible. They're way below average. And that's because Call of Duty takes more skill than you might realize, because it's all relative. I think a skill gap is needed for a sense of achievement, but when it gets to that level of impossible to get 20 kills until level 50 is where I draw the line. This comment is okay, but it's super subjective. I don't think the Battlefield 1 skill gap is so large that it seems impossible. I don't think so at all. And then when it comes to Call of Duty, I don't think it's so easy that in 5 games you'll seem like you're hacking. I just play against the Christmas noobs in COD World War II, which is one of the most simple CODs ever made. And the Christmas noobs, after their first prestige, they can't win a gunfight to save their goddamn life. This next one's from Suleiman Rashid. I don't really know how to say your name, so I'm sorry, but here it is on screen. A skill gap in gaming simply means it would take some time and practice to achieve a decent level of play, and it takes longer to master. While I actually have no issue with Battlefield's gunplay, especially in Battlefield 1, I do think it's designed to specifically like that since it's a World War I game. if it was... Why did people bring up that Battlefield 1 is World War I and that justifies the gunplay? Compared to Battlefield 4, which I love, it's modern day and gameplay resembles that perfectly. I play a variety of shooters. In fact, I always did dedicate myself to playing the most hardcore games, whether they be shooters or fighters. I would say some of the hardest shooters I've played are Gears of War, which I also love, along with Lawbreakers, Halo 2, and Quake, which are some of my faves. All of those games don't have much of a large audience at this time of age. Only when they came out, those games were extremely popular. Those games mainly dedicated I need to slow down here. Those games mainly dedicated its online play to those hardcore skilled players, since many of its casual audience moved on while most of the good players stayed. CSGO has one of the largest audiences because it's probably the first competitive shooter which does have a high skill gap. Okay. In conclusion, the level of skill gap is simply, in general, how long it takes for the average person to get good or play at a decent enough level to enjoy the game. That comment's a bit of a mess, but I feel like I see where you're coming from. Those games with higher skill gaps, when people get good at them, they stick with them and they have this long, loyal fan base. And sure. Here's another longtime subscriber of mine, Sebastian Lewis. Says, in my opinion, skill gap should be used to describe the difference between a regular player, a player who knows the basics of the game and can do fairly well, but is easily dominated by the veterans who knows the ins and outs of the game and will usually be a great asset to their team even when their odds are stacked against them. Get good should be used when someone complains about the game being too hard but never makes the effort to like or understand the mechanics of the game. That's a good point. This has nothing to do with the question, so please don't read if you don't care. I don't believe in the skill argument that most people use because there are different types of skill depending on your specific playstyle. End game. It doesn't say that here, but end game. I like your comment, Sebastian. Very well thought. I think you're simple to the point. I like that. But skill is relative to the game you're in. Call of Duty is easy, but it's easy for everyone. So how do you work within the restraints and lack of restraints in that game? It's kind of difficult at times. All right, this next comment is from Draxil, or I don't know how to say your name, so I'm sorry. This is a question of skill floor more than skill gap. The skill gap is the difference in capacity or capability between the best and worst players in a game. So a high skill gap suggests lots of room to grow. A skill floor is the minimum amount of ability players usually require to be able to compare within the game at a basic level. Dota 2 and CSGO are great examples of games with high skill floors. Both require a large amount of learning, practice, and understanding to really play to levels recognizable by more experienced players. I think I read that right. Akin to the difference between someone on their first driving lesson compared to a properly qualified driver. However, specifically applied to Battlefield, this is more of a question of game design in my opinion. Unlike games like CS or Dota, theirs is a low bar of skill required to compete within a Battlefield match. Basic awareness, how objective works, understanding how to attack them at basic level, and the ability to point and click. Sure, there may be something of a skill gap in terms of effective time to kill or good use of utility and map awareness when taking objectives, but these should not be some sort of requirement to enjoy the game to a satisfying degree. Unlike a skill floor, which is a mandatory level of ability, you can fight in Battlefield without that skill. In my opinion, the lack of control you've described over the weapons in the game sounds like a poor attempt by the developers to introduce arbitrary skill floor, which unlike other games doesn't really satisfy players and still leaves enemies uncomfortably bullet spongy. I'm sorry for rambling. This is a good comment. We're going to do one more here. This one's nice and small. This one also has an Aaron Hansen picture, so I had to pick it. Sim Gunther says, skill gap, the difference between two players and their ability to utilize their knowledge of the game in order to overcome other players on their way to victory. The moment that you notice an opponent knows exactly what you know, but can't use that knowledge to their advantage to solve a problem, in this case defeating you in combat with their loadout versus yours, is when you say, get good, son. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. I know I didn't read all of your guys' comments in this video, and that might offend you if you did spend a long time writing your comment. I don't even think I deserve to wear this shirt now because I have probably failed a couple of you, but at the same time, I do think that the words skill gap or skill floor, skill ceiling, skill spectrum, whatever you want to say, gets thrown around to justify things people don't want to deal with. For me, when I talk about a game that has mechanics I don't like, I get told that it's the skill gap and that I need to get good. Sometimes, I just don't like it. The thing about skill gaps, though, that I want to say at the end of this video is that you can get good at anything. You can get good with any game. You can get good at a first-person shooter that has 99 other players and a large map that runs at 15 frames per second at times. And you know what I'm talking about. You can get good at that. You can go ahead and get good at a 15 frames per second competitive shooter against 99 other players. Every game has something you need to learn. If you do not have the heart and mind to learn a game, you are not going to enjoy it. Whether it's Call of Duty, Minecraft, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Star Wars Battlefront, or fucking Mario Odyssey, it doesn't matter. Every game can be a gift or a curse depending on your willingness to learn it. I just don't like that people defend games by saying they take skill. Every game has a learning curve. There are some games that take more skill than the game you enjoy. The game you think takes the most skill, there might be other games out there that take way longer to learn. They're way more complicated, and they have a way stricter meta. But that doesn't mean it's a good game, and it's not a good defense. I'm sorry, it's just not a selling point to me. Oh, this game takes skill, and it has a high skill gap. Fine, but is it fun? Is it enjoyable? Is the questions we should be asking. I love the Battlefield franchise. I don't like Battlefield 1 that much, as good as a game as I guess it is. I don't like it. That doesn't mean I need to get good at it, it means I don't like it. It taking more skill than Battlefield 4 is not a selling point when Battlefield 4 gives me and my friends hours of more fun, even when we're not doing well. So basically what I'm saying is skill is not a selling point. Skill and challenge, if done correctly, can make a game so much better. Games that have actual tension and things you have to learn that challenge your mind, there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. Some things shouldn't be so hard, some things shouldn't be so random, some things shouldn't be so strange, other things should be more intuitive, easier, some things shouldn't be a challenge, some things should. It's way more nuanced than my game harder equal better. It's stupid. I've seen a lot of that in my comments section. What do you want from a new Call of Duty game? I want to take some skill. Alright. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video for whatever fucking reason, and I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.